Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial on Cinema 4D modeling tools. In this video I will demonstrate how to use these tools with parametric primitives and splines. This is Pete Merrick with Triplet 3D. Alright, so let's get right into Cinema 4D, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a cube, and I'm just going to resize this really quickly, and then I'm going to grab an array object, create that. You can also find the array up here in the main menu. Okay, so then I'm going to take the cube and I'm going to make it a child of the array. Alright, so what the array is going to do is it's going to duplicate this cube in a radial fashion. Okay, so if we click on the array down here in the attributes manager, we can actually control the radius and we can control the number of copies. Alright, and also we can control the frequency, and this is going to offset the amplitude a little bit, and then the frequency. There we go. Alright, so now we have a circle made of these cubes. I'll just increase the number a little bit. And this is a pretty effective tool if you want to create a lot of geometry really quickly. So I'll create another array object, and I'll take the first array and make it a child of the array that I just created. So this is going to give us another row, another few rows, actually seven circles of that first array, and we can start controlling this by increasing the radius. This comes in really handy if you want to create a lot of geometry really quickly. We can go ahead and animate this thing. We can animate the radius, this circle just kind of growing out like this. So I'll just show you how to do that real quick. That's kind of jumping ahead into more animation features in Cinema 4D, but I'll just show you this real quick. So radius, anytime you see a little button next to a parameter, if you hold down Control, you could set a keyframe for that. So I'm on keyframe 0, and I'm going to jump over to keyframe 60, and I'm going to take this radius and increase it, and then I'm going to hold down Control and click this little button right next to radius. So if I just hit play, here's what we created really quickly. So you can get a lot of geometry and a lot of mileage out of these default tools in Cinema 4D. So that's the array function. Now I will show you the atom array. So the first thing that we need is some sort of geometry, and I'll hit S on the keyboard to zoom into this. And then I'll create an atom array. So I'll drop my cylinder right inside of the atom array to make the cylinder a child of the atom array. And here's what it does. The atom array literally creates spheres at every vertex point, and for all the height segments that we have here on this cylinder, it's going to create like an additional little cylinder. So we can go back into our cylinder and control the rotation segments. That's going to give us less rotation segments, and we can also control how many height segments we have. Right now we don't have any heights. Well, we have one height segment, but if we start to increase this, we start to get additional geometry with this array object. So going into the atom array object, we can control the size of the radius, the cylinder radius rather, and we can also control the sphere radius. Pretty cool. And even after we do that, we can go back into our cylinder and still manipulate the edges and the segments, the height segments. So it's a pretty versatile little tool. And you can use it on pretty much any type of geometry. So let's just create an oil tank. I'll drop the oil tank inside of the atom array, and then I'll take the cylinder and delete it. Same thing with the oil tank. On all the points, it's going to create these spheres, and with all the lines, it's going to create these cylinders. So we can just go back into the atom array and control the size of these. So if we take a render, here's what that looks like. It's a see-through object with spheres on the points and cylinders on the edges. I want to show you how the boole works. So the boole, really what that is, it's going to take two pieces of geometry and it'll use one to cut into the other. So let's just start with a cube, and what we'll do is we'll create a second piece of geometry, a sphere, and we'll just push this over like that. And now we'll create a boole object, and I'll take the sphere and the cube and I'll put it inside of the boole. So what is happening right now is this cube is cutting into our sphere, right? We can also change the order of the cube and the sphere. And then what's going to happen is the sphere is cutting inside of the cube. All right, so if we go to the boole, there's these Boolean types over here on the first option in the object tab. So we could start playing around with these. A union B, that creates one solid object. A subtract B, that's what we had it on. A intersect B, that gives us a totally different shape. A without B, something like that. Let's just leave it on the default, A subtract B. So even at this point, once you have your objects inside of the boole, you can go back in and take the sphere and you can change its position and it'll cut into the actual sphere a little bit differently. So if we take a render, here's what that looks like. I can still go back in since the sphere is a parametric primitive and increase the size of this. So here's what that looks like. So there's all kinds of different things that you can do with this. Change the position again, it'll cut more into that cube. And that's what that looks like. So yeah, that's the boole object. Pretty handy. The next thing that I wanted to show you is the spline mask. So the way that this works, you actually need two splines. I'm going to create a circle spline, and I'm going to make sure that's selected in the object manager. Command C, Command V on the keyboard, that'll create a duplicate. So I'll take my duplicated circle and I'll just change the radius. Okay, and I'll push this circle on over here, and then I'll create a spline mask. I'll take both of these circles and I'll drop it into the spline mask. So what's happening right now is they're just we have it on A union B, so that's going to connect those two splines together to create a compound shape. What we could do is go A subtract B, or B subtract A. It'll give us like a crescent moon, and then still after we have it inside of the spline mask, we can go through and we can still edit this shape by selecting our second circle, and we can make it a little bit bigger if we wanted. And still at this point, all we have are splines. So if we take a render, we're just going to get black. So what we need to do, as explained in the previous tutorial, is use some sort of NURBS object. So if I take an extrude NURBS and then I place my spline mask as a child of the extrude NURBS, now when we take a render, now we actually have some geometry that shows up in the render. So we could take the extrude NURBS, extrude it out a little bit more, go to our caps, add a fillet cap on both the front and the back. And even at this point, we can still go back in and we can still tweak the shape of our object. I can resize the circle, something like that. I can bring it down. Pretty cool little feature. So that's the spline mask. I'm going to jump down to instance. This is pretty much a special duplicate function that doesn't create additional geometry. I rarely ever use this. I'll use a MoGraph cloner instead. The cloner object is way more efficient, has more functionality. So let me just run through that real quick. Here's a cube, and if I wanted to duplicate this, I would just drop this right into the cloner, go in my cloner, and then I can offset the y-axis. And really quickly, now I have 3 clones, now I have 10 clones. And if you hit this render instances button, it's not actually going to duplicate the geometry. It's just going to create instances so it shows up in the render, and it'll make your renderings go a lot faster if you use this little button with the cloner, render instances. All right, so I use the MoGraph cloner way more than I'll ever use this instance button. That brings us down to the Metaball. So this is actually a really cool little feature as well. So let's just start with a sphere. I'll zoom in by hitting S on the keyboard. Command C, Command V to duplicate it, and I'll grab this little nub and resize it. Command C, Command V, create another duplicate, and I'll push this back. Maybe I'll make this one a little bit bigger. I'll duplicate this again. Bring this guy out over here, resize this, and I'll create a Metaball object. I'll grab all of my spheres and I'll make them children of the Metaball. So what this does, literally, it creates like a virtual skin over all of our geometry, right? And if I take a render, here's what it looks like. It looks kind of like fluid, liquid. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to animate some of these spheres really quickly. I'm at frame 0, I'm going to add a keyframe here, and I'm going to jump over to frame 60, and I'm going to grab this first sphere, and I'm going to push it out like that, add another keyframe, and grab my second sphere, add a keyframe, jump over to last frame, move this out over here, add another keyframe. I'll take my sphere 3, push this over to here, jump to my last keyframe, push this out a little bit, add another keyframe, and here's the last one. I'll add a keyframe at frame 1, jump over to keyframe 60, push this back in, add a keyframe. Alright, so now when I hit play, these are all kind of moving apart, right? And I'm going to create one more piece of geometry that I'm going to put in here. This is a cube, and I'm just going to resize this by using the scale tool, and I'll push this out over here, maybe resize it a little bit more, and I'll put this inside of the Metaball as well. And what that's going to do, it's going to create geometry on the corners of this cube. So if I take a rendering right now, here's what we get. We can also animate this as well, sort of growing out of this whole cluster. So let's just take this cube, and I'll push it back so it's inside of this whole the whole Metaball, and then I'll go to frame 60. I'll take this and just animate it so it's all the way out here. Add another keyframe. So here's our animation. So here's what our Metaball animation looks like. Pretty cool. Alright, so that's the Metaball. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is the Symmetry object. So again, let's create a cube, and I'm going to resize this, and I'll push it up, and I'll push it over. Okay, so now I'll create a Symmetry object, drop the cube inside of there, and what it does is it creates symmetry based on this center of the 3D environment. So here's the center right here, and we can go into the Symmetry object, and we could change the mirror plane. Right now it's Z, Y. We could change it to X, Y. We're not really seeing too much because it's right on the cube is right on the X axis. So if we move that cube up, we can see the mirroring, the symmetry of that. And if we change it again to XZ, we get that. Change it back to the default. That's the Symmetry object. Again, this is Pete Merrick with Triplet 3D. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thanks for watching.